to day 2 of the Refresh Renew Summit with Soul Heart Collaboration. I'm your hostess, Jamie Allen Bishop, here to introduce our next speaker. Jo Self is the founder of Discover Yourself and Practical Strengths. She is a Gallup-Certified CliftonStrengths advocate, global speaker, and consultant. Jo believes strengths aren't just labels. They're a language, a practice, and a bridge to deeper connection. Her mission is to help people be seen, heard, and understood, which she calls appreciate, communicate, illuminate. Having lived in 4 countries and fluent in Spanish, Jo brings both strategy and soul to her work with leaders, educators, parents, and teams. A mompreneur and speaker, she empowers others to embrace their talents with clarity and confidence. You can connect with her at Discover Jo Self. Please help me welcome my friend and colleague, Jo Self.
What if the greatest disruption in business isn't technology, but rather leadership that chooses curiosity over control? I'm here to rethink leadership with you, not leadership as power or hierarchy. Honestly, I've always thought of leadership as horizontal. We all impact someone every day. We are all leaders and we are all followers. But what if leadership was more about curiosity, connection, and conscious choice? Because the smartest leaders today don't just manage results, they transform people. So why are we leading with yesterday's playbook? I mean, we've entered a new age. We have AI, hybrid work, global disruption. And not only that, think about this. We have 5 generations working together currently. But millennials will make up 75% of the workforce by the end of this year. And Gen Z is already outnumbering boomers, with the expectation that most boomers are going to be out of the workforce completely in the next 10 years. And yet, so many leaders are still operating with that industrial era mindset: command, control, compliance. Well, you know what? That playbook doesn't work anymore. There is a cost to doing things the old way. We have disconnected teams, stagnant adaptability, burnout, disengagement. In fact, Gallup tells us only about 1 in 3 people worldwide are engaged at work. And that's not just a business problem. That is a leadership crisis. And here's the hidden cost. When people shut down at work, they also shut down at home, in communities, and in society. I know you're feeling it. I know you've seen it. You have to have felt, especially since the pandemic. We have disconnected teams. We're disconnected from our neighbors. We are stagnant in our places. We are retreating away from each other, not going toward one another. We are burned out, and we are protecting our sanity at all costs while not knowing who to look up to. Well, I think there's a new way. It's not just about thinking smarter. It's about leading human. One of my favorite TED Talks of all time is the Athena Doctrine. It's by John Gersema, and their research showed us that people across 64,000 interviews and 13 countries believe the world is better when leaders embrace traits like empathy, collaboration, and compassion. In other words, leading human. keep hearing all of these things. Well, we just can't do anything and people don't care. And people care, but if they're not treated as human, how can we expect humanity to show up as human? Smart leadership isn't about being the sharpest strategist. It is about being human enough to connect, adapt, and inspire. All right, so how do we lead human? 3 practices make the difference. Self-awareness. Gallup proves that leaders who know and apply their strengths are far more effective and trusted. We need foresight. We need to be able to see around corners. We need to see the trends and prepare people for change that is coming, but not just prepare people. We need to create the future we want. My favorite quote, and I love saying it's by Abraham Lincoln because technically he's in my family tree, but it can be attributed to a lot of people. But the idea is the best way to predict your future is to create it. So come on, people, we got to start creating. And that third pillar, well, it's community mindedness. We need to measure success not just by profits, but by the ripples we create. Interdependence is the essence of a village, and we need to start rebuilding that village sooner rather than later. And this is where the Athena doctrine and Gallup meet. Human-centered traits with evidence-based strengths. The first person you lead is yourself. You make a difference whether you want to or not. Gallup research shows employees don't want perfect leaders. They want authentic leaders who know their strengths and admit their blind spots. That self-awareness builds trust, and trust drives performance. And I know this is all in the workplace, but to be honest, think about your community leaders. Think about your local leadership. Think about our political leadership. This is not leadership that is just within the confines of a 9-to-5. This is a global leadership need. When someone is willing to recognize what they can do and how they can change, that changes everything. We do need open dialogue. We do need open questions. In fact, doing strengths was the one thing that saved my sanity and saved my job all in one boot. Several years ago, almost 20 years ago now, I hate to think it could possibly be that long, but about 20 years ago now, I was in a job that I absolutely loved. I couldn't believe it had fallen into my lap. I was working at the world's largest restaurant, fast food restaurant company. And after 6 months of my supervisor constantly throwing X's over my ideas, flipping the page over and then telling me what he wanted, I was done. I walked out of the office crying and I couldn't do it anymore. But instead of being completely defeated and just quitting and walking away and trying something else, I gathered my composure. I went back into his office and I said, "You've done your strengths. Here's a disc test. I want to meet back in 1 week and I want to understand what's happening because I cannot keep working like this. And quite frankly, I'm a single woman. I've got no kids. I've got nothing to lose. And I love this job. So I want to know what's happening." Well, we met a week later. We went through our strengths and it became crystal clear what was happening. He loved my ideas. My ideas were just too big. All he was doing was saying it was too big. Go back, start again, and start smaller, think smaller, because what you're doing is the third step out. So when we realized that and recognized it, I could go in with my big idea and he would go, "I love it. Is that step 3 or 4?" And I go, "Oh gosh, I think that might be 3." And he's like, "Great. So what can we do? What are the baby steps to get to that level?" Because you always want to leave people wanting a little bit more. So you've got to grow gradually. It's one of the best lessons I ever got. And in turn, he became one of my biggest champions, and I became one of his biggest confidants. We absolutely shifted our relationship because we were both willing to look at what was happening and find a solution. The next opportunity is foresight. Smart leaders really ask, what's around the corner? The Athena doctrine showed us the hunger for leaders who are patient, collaborative, willing to listen. Foresight isn't just strategy. It's paying attention. It's seeing patterns. It's preparing people. not just for profits, but for the future. And then finally, we need to be more community-minded. Smart leaders measure success by the ripples they create. My entire philosophy is about us all being the pebble and creating the ripple. And Gallup's well-being research tells us that thriving workplaces, really thriving communities, lift entire communities. People take their energy home, into schools, into civic life. Leadership doesn't stop at the office door. So is the way that you are leading inspiring others, or is it squashing their dreams? And now I want to tell you about Mike Ritz. One leader, one shift, one giant ripple. I love telling the story of Mike Ritz. Mike Ritz decided in 2015 that he wanted to make Rhode Island the first strengths-based state. And he did it because he was the leader, he was the director of Leadership Rhode Island. And that year, Gallup was still doing the State of the American Workplace, and Rhode Island was dead last, number 50 out of 50 states, as being the most actively disengaged state in the entire country. That means nobody was happy at their jobs, and they were actively complaining about it. Well, Mike Ritz said, nope, not on my watch. He decided to pull strengths, one shift. He started using strengths in his leadership program. And it had such a high impact that all of those leaders from the community, from schools, from smaller organizations, from nonprofits, from larger companies, they all started taking strengths back to their organizations and to their schools, to where they worked, to their families. And the following year, Gallup was still 49 out of 50 states in I get to use my strengths every day, which is a category from Gallup's Q12. So they were still low. But in 2017, so 2 years later from that first horrible result of being dead last, they moved all the way up to 15. They were now one of the best states to work in the entire country. And that number 49 level in 2016, if I use my strengths at work every day, rose to number 1 in 1 year. Tell me making that shift where we start focusing on what's right and stop trying to look at everything that's wrong. Tell me again it can't happen. Tell me again that can't make a change. Because that, my friends, is proof right there. So how are you showing up? Are you leading with yesterday's playbook? Or are you willing to embrace curiosity, show compassion, create the future you most desire? What kind of ripples are you creating? The world doesn't need more bosses. It needs smarter leaders. Leaders who embody both strength and empathy. Leaders who see around corners and lift others up. That's the kind of leadership that transforms not just businesses, but life. And it starts with us. It starts with you. And if you want to explore what that looks like in your world, I would love to walk alongside you as a leadership partner. Let's start creating ripples together. Let's raise curiosity, create connection, deepen understanding. That's the invitation. That's how we start to transform leadership. And that's how we start building stronger together.